We start with the unfolding humanitarian crisis in the Horn of Africa. The UN says the region is experiencing its worst drought in 4 decades, and the problem is compounded by a lack of humanitarian aid. As a result, millions could face famine in parts of Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia and Djibouti. The ongoing war in Ukraine is further worsening the already worrying situation. Somalia in particular is the worst affected. DW correspondent Mariel Mueller traveled to the town of Dollow, where 3 camps for internally displaced people have sprung up in the last few months.
15 days of walking through the hot desert, with little water and no food. Hirsio Mohammed left her village with 3 children, but she arrived with only 1.
We were walking and walking. My son was very thirsty and exhausted. He asked me many times, "Mommy, water, mommy, water." He started gasping, but there was nothing, no drop of water I could give him.
Her sick 8-year-old daughter died on arrival at the camp, suffering from a bad cough and weakened from the journey.
As the drought worsens, children are among the most vulnerable. The UN projects that if nothing is done, 350,000 of the 1.4 million severely malnourished children could starve to death.
At a nearby clinic, we meet mothers waiting for treatment for their malnourished babies. One of them is Ramo Nowadere. When she lost over 100 goats due to the drought, she left her village with her 9 children. Without the support of her relatives, they wouldn't survive, she says. 2 of her children are malnourished.
I can't put him down to rest because he's sick. But since last night, swelling and fever have gone down. When we lost our livestock, we lost our minds. We can't live without our livestock.
Like her, many of those who fled are livestock farmers. More than 500,000 people have been driven from their homes this year alone, according to the World Food Programme. More than 6 million are now facing critical hunger.
This drought has the face of a child. And not only are children suffering from malnutrition, they are also suffering from other risks, such as early marriage in the case of girls, and then being recruited in armed groups in the case of boys.
The Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab is a constant threat in this region. These women have come from a town which has been under siege by Al-Shabaab for the last 7 years.
We were denied from farming our land, blocked from growing our greens. The water access was blocked. There was no access to food either and no cars moving. We left because of that. We came on foot, we walked for several nights, we grabbed our children and walked away.
In order to survive, people try to earn money in nearby villages and buy food with the little they have. Inflated prices make the situation even worse.
The prices of food in Somalia were already soaring up because people's livestock are dying, cereal harvests are way below long-term averages. We are concerned that the war in Ukraine could further exacerbate what were already soaring prices in Somalia.
Somalia is heavily dependent on Ukraine and Russia for its wheat imports. With the port of Odessa in Ukraine now closed, the UN World Food Programme is warning that the conflict could further drive up food prices.
We are having to prioritize to really target those most in need for immediate life-saving, but that means that we are taking from the hungry to feed the starving.
WFP needs $192 million urgently to avert famine that could hit as early as mid-year. It's a race against time.
Let's talk more about this with Francesco Rigamonti. He is the Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for Oxfam in East and Central Horn of Africa. Hello, Francesco. Thanks for joining us. So, millions in the Horn of Africa, especially in Somalia, are facing risk of famine. What is the driving force behind this?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. There are a number of drivers for this crisis. Conflict, climate change, creating a risk of increased drought and floods, the effects of COVID. We should not forget that the Horn of Africa was hit last year by the worst locust infestation in years. And of course, the increase of prices are contributing to this crisis.
So many different factors, but who's affected the most?
This crisis, unfortunately, is very unequal. Is affecting part of the countries where there has been less investment by the local government, and is affecting women and children. Just to give you an idea, there are at the moment in Somalia 1.4 million children that they are malnourished. That's like more than the population of Munich. There are 350,000 people, children in Somalia that they are really at risk of starvation if no intervention is taken. And it's the same in South Sudan, 1.3 million children there, again, more than the population of Munich.
And as you say, rightfully so, an intervention is needed. I understand the much-needed support is being hampered by the war in Ukraine. How is that impacting the crisis in the Horn of Africa?
Thank you for this question. There are like a number of elements that they are at play here. First of all is the attention, the international media attention and the international donor attention is now focused on Ukraine and is not on the Horn of Africa and East Africa. Then there is an effect on food prices because Russia and Ukraine are producer of wheat, and this is creating this crisis is creating an increase in the prices, which were already high before. And then the price of oil that is making our job and the job of our partners more expensive and is driving all the costs up. And then there is an issue related to the price of other items like fertilizers, and those are the effects of the Ukraine crisis on the situation in East Africa.
I guess it's easier to blame the situation in Ukraine, but even before the war in Ukraine, aid alone has never been enough to tackle food insecurity in the region. People are dying and many others are suffering. What is needed to solve the problem?
I think what is needed is a concerned effort. As you correctly pointed out, aid is not enough. We need to have action at the local level. The local government should put resources to address this crisis. International community should give more and more. If we are talking about the appeal, the UN appeal, we are talking about 4 billion. It seems like a big amount of money, but is not. If it's compared with the money that we put for COVID or the money that the international community has allocated to Ukraine. So it's the political will that is missing. And we also need a concerned effort of all the actors, UN agencies, international organizations like Oxfam, but also local organizations. They are on the front line of this response.
Okay, Francesco Rigamonti with Oxfam in East and Central Horn of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, it's not just the Horn of Africa facing the humanitarian crisis. Some West African countries are also struggling to meet food security demands. But the crisis there is mainly driven by Islamist insurgencies that have forced millions of people off their land in countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Nigeria. Many who rely on farming for their survival are prevented from accessing it. DW's Flourish Chukura went to Maiduguri in Nigeria to meet one farmer who's afraid to go back, even though the government says it is safe to return.
Abu and his family have found safety here. 7 years ago, they ran away from their home village of Baga, 200 kilometers from here, when Boko Haram attacked. Thousands were killed, among them Abu's brother.
Boko Haram came into Baga firing their guns. We started running, but they came after us. They told my brother to put down his 2-year-old daughter, and then they shot him in the neck.
Abu now lives in a settlement for internally displaced people. Recently, the government said it would shut down the camps. It stopped NGOs from providing aid and sent people back to their villages, even though the danger of Boko Haram has not gone away.
This is one of the few remaining IDP camps in Maiduguri. More than 20,000 people who fled Boko Haram insurgents in their villages live here. And for 6 years, they've depended on aid organizations for their food. Now those aid organizations are saying they can't help them anymore.
It's really difficult. My late brother's 2 children, my parents, my sick older brother's 8 children all depend on me for food. We're really struggling to feed them.
The government says it does not want people to depend on aid, but instead they should go back to their livelihoods and farms. It gave them some money to restart their lives and worked to rebuild the villages. The government says they are safe to return home, despite frequent reports of attacks.
We don't relocate people where there is no peace or no security. If people feel they are not safe to return to their village or town, we give them a place that is very close to Maiduguri or somewhere else that is safe so that these people can start farming again. This is our intention.
Many of the displaced say they do want to go home, but only when their safety can be guaranteed.
Honestly, it's not right. The poor are forced to do whatever the government tells them. I'm staying here because I don't have a choice. This is not what I want.
Rights organizations like Human Rights Watch have criticized the government's decision, calling it unconscionable and saying it creates risks and hardships for people who have already lost everything. Without urgent aid, hundreds of thousands of them will not know where their next meal will come from.
This has really brought us a lot of worries about food. Children now have to sell water to earn the money that allows us to feed them. Women go into the bush to fetch firewood and sell it to get some money for food. It's frightening.
With food supplies from aid organizations halted and no end in sight to the Boko Haram insurgency, Abu and other displaced people here at the camp in Maiduguri can only pray that things get better.
Now, food security is just one of the issues affecting Africa. Leaders recognize the need for more collaborative solutions to make life bearable for many on the continent. This week, politicians and other decision makers from Africa and Europe got together in Berlin for what is called the Africa Roundtable. The event addressed topics including how the war in Ukraine is impacting lives across Africa. Decision makers at the event included Amadou Hott, Senegal's Minister of Economy, Planning and Cooperation.
Ladies and gentlemen, today...
And it's a pleasure to welcome Minister Amadou Hott right here with me in the studio. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very welcome. So, of all the issues discussed at the Africa Roundtable event, what, in your opinion, needs urgent attention?
Thank you very much for being here. The Africa Roundtable is a great platform for political and business leaders to meet to discuss pressing issues that are affecting the continent today, but also to discuss on how we can strengthen the partnership between Africa and Europe. And for us, it was very important to be there to insist on the most pressing issues that we are dealing with today, especially after COVID-19, or we're still managing COVID-19, it's not 100% gone. And suddenly we have the Ukrainian crisis that is affecting everybody around the world, but even more so affecting Africans.
Let's hammer a bit now on the war in Ukraine, sure, which is affecting many around the world, including across the continent. There's rising cost of living, fuel and food prices really increasing. What should African countries do to ease the burden of citizens?
We have short-term actions that need to be taken to immediately reduce the impact on the population. We need to find ways to reduce the impact of increase of food price and oil prices. In many African countries, you need to basically provide some financial support, foregoing some tax revenue, because when you import product, there are tax custom duties that need to be paid, but some countries have to cancel those to avoid the prices increasing. At the same time, also, countries need to really think medium, long term. It's not acceptable that Africa, that has vast arable land, that has water, that has everything, continues to rely on other countries for food.
But that's the case, though. And all these things you're saying should be done is really not being done by many African countries, and it's the ordinary person that suffers.
And now it's going to be done. We won't have a choice. We've seen, actually, during the COVID-19 crisis, several countries, including Senegal, we have put food sovereignty, but also pharmaceutical sovereignty at the heart of our recovery plans. While we are executing those plans, the Ukrainian crisis has come. What we are doing right now, a couple of things. One is we are providing some subsidy on food, and it is affecting our budget. Today, the increase in oil prices, increase in food prices, it is costing us an extra 3%, roughly, almost 3% of GDP that the government has to find from somewhere to support the poor. But what we are doing also in Senegal, and some countries are doing it, is to do targeted cash transfers. 4 days ago, we launched a massive 43 billion CFA, which is about $80 million initiative to really provide cash to the poorest families in Senegal, about 550,000 families across the country that are receiving money from the government to help them address the increase in food price, to address some of the bills that they have. Yeah.
Now, at the Africa Roundtable event, you touched on it a bit earlier. You talked about a paradigm shift,
yes.
Building a new EU-Africa partnership. What's wrong with the current one, and how should it be like?
The current one is working, but we can do much better. Africa has many needs, and we need to accelerate Africa's development. We cannot wait for 50 years or 100 years on something that we can do in 10, 15 years if there is a will. Whenever there is a will, the leadership, there is a way. We've seen during the COVID times, we've been innovative, we've been bold. The world raised $20 trillion only for G20 countries to deal with COVID. And for Africa's needs, I think if people believe in it and say that an Africa that is prosperous, that has a bigger, actually, middle class, is positive for Europe and for the rest of the world. And the Ukrainian crisis has shown that Europe needs also to diversify its source of revenue, but also it needs to diversify the markets where it's selling its product to. That market is Africa, we believe, over the next years to come. But that market needs today big investments so that we can create the wealth and the economic opportunities for many Africans so that tomorrow they will be the consumers of Europe.
We've been talking about Africa beyond aid. Many African leaders have been talking about that. And as we all agree, there's a difference between talking it and walking it. What really is needed to achieve the dream of Africa beyond aid so that we will be self-sufficient and self-reliant enough and not have to go out?
Several things should be done domestically. We Africans, there are things we need to do. The reforms that we have started, we need to do more of those reforms, in particular on domestic resource mobilization, to generate more revenue for the government, which means to widen the tax base, not to increase the tax rate for the people already paying tax, but to make sure that those who don't pay tax, we bring them into the tax system. So this is one. But also the international community has to be also more, I would say, proactive when it comes to Africa's issues. One example, if you take the rating agencies, for us, the ratings that are being actually assigned to Africa probably are not always reflecting the real risk on the ground, and that has to change.
That has to change. Amadou Hott, Senegal's Minister of Economy, Planning and Cooperation. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.